Well, Brandon here, and this week's Bushel Up is the start of the next few weeks where we're going to go through some of the key nutrients in crop production, and just a reminder of why they're important, how we should manage them. We're going to start off with phosphorus this week, often seen as the P, or P2O5 is the form that the plant looks for. So when we're talking about phosphorus, there's a couple important things. Obviously this year, one of the big concerns everybody has is the high price of phosphorus. We're looking at historically high prices for 1152O, our dry form that we primarily use, or even the liquid 1034O being a little bit of tight supply and the high price there. But it's important to remember just how important this nutrient is to us. First of all, one key thing about phosphorus is it's consistently needed throughout the season. It's very important early on in that early plant development. When that shoot's coming out of the ground, that initial shoot and root development are highly dependent upon available phosphorus. It's very important in that growth. That's why we use the pop-up fertilizers in furrow. So we look at a low salt like AgPro to help get that corn plant going. And then the next place we got to understand, the next key fact about phosphorus is it's taken up primarily through roots, through root interception. So we want to have that phosphorus placed in a root zone. So that's why a lot of guys will choose to band 2 inches off to the side, a couple inches deep. So as those roots eventually develop out of that plant, we have a banded area that it can tap into and get a concentration of phosphorus. A couple things that are really important later on in the season is that we have good moisture. As soils dry out, phosphorus becomes less available. It's not in that solution to be taken up by roots. We don't have fresh root growth. So in dry land, if you have low phosphorus levels, we can run into a lot of trouble if we get very dry. The other thing is have a good root structure. So compaction, rootworm, anything that compromises root structure will affect our ability to take up phosphorus in the plant. There's a couple enemies to phosphorus. One of them is calcium. Phosphorus really likes to bind to calcium and form calcium phosphate. Once that happens, it's unavailable to our roots. So we look at things to protect that phosphorus, keep it from binding to calcium. We use Phosphorus to help prevent that. We use Prolock up early to help prevent that tie-up of that phosphorus to calcium. And then phosphorus also has a lack of mobility. That's one of its weaknesses. It's not mobile through the soil typically. It's going to be very stationary, so we have to have phosphorus throughout that root zone, especially to get the uptake that we like to see later on. It's important to remember phosphorus. Half of it's taken before grain fill, and then the other half it pretty much contributes to grain fill. So when we look at total needs of phosphorus per bushel, we're looking at 0.5 to 0.6. And when we look at the corn we haul to town, we're taking off 0.35 to 0.4. So for those of you that had those areas we celebrated this year where maybe we hit 300 bushel in a field or in parts of a field, that's 100 pounds of P2O5 we were moving off. So there's no way to replace that without adding some fertilizer. Phosphorus does bank in the soil. Typically there's more phosphorus in the soil than what's available to the plant, so we rely on microbial activity and mineralization to free that up. That's why we see some of the benefits to cover crops, getting that microbial activity started earlier in the year. And we definitely like to see good warm temperatures. When we get cold, really wet, or really dry, we cut down on that mineralization, so that keeps that phosphorus from becoming available. Finally, how do you look at a soil test? It's your part per million times your depth times 0.3 times 2.03 to convert P to P2O5. So if you're a grower and you have 10 part per million and you think, I'm not putting phosphorus on, please understand when you do the math, you've only got 55 pounds of available P. We just took off 100 and you've only got 55 that's available. So big caution. That's my caution words right down here. Big caution about just taking a year off. I know we don't like the high prices, but it's just like if you don't like your utility bill, choose not to pay it this month. It's eventually going to come due. You have 2 utilities bills next month. So I highly encourage guys not to just look the other way, take a year off, but let's talk about how we manage that, and we look forward to visiting with you about that.